With changes to the hospitality industry coming on the horizon, both through the Employment Rights Bill, changes to immigration, and raises to national insurance rates, recruiting the right people to your business is arguably more important than it ever was before. But how do you make the most out of a tight market and ensuring that your most important resource is both valued and kept long term? I'm Cal Barron, and welcome to RWK Goodman's Legal Thinking podcast as part of our Hospitality Pressure Points series. Joining me to talk about these topics is Paul Mannering, the National Hospitality and Culinary Lead from HIT Training. Welcome, Paul. And Kirsty Swan, a Senior Associate in RWK Goodman's employment team. Hi, Kirsty.
Hi.
Paul, I'd like to start with you if I can. What has the kind of hospitality industry looked like over the last 12 months, especially in regards to, recruitment, training?
It's a good question. It's been tough. It's been really challenging for operators. It's almost a perfect storm when you look at things like Brexit, you look at COVID, you look at rising costs, at the cost of the business to operate, recruitment challenges. It's the best time, almost the best time to invest in training and development, to stabilise, to support that. So I think there's some real positives there, but it is becoming increasingly difficult with all those additional pressures for operators, and I think they need to look at that point of difference. What can they do differently? How can they develop their business, increase spend, see that return on investment, coming through, provided by the likes of hospitality, sort of training and development, and what's available to them.
It's interesting that you kind of use the phrase perfect storm. Kirsty, from some of your experience working with clients, what have been some of the common pain points, pressures that businesses are seeing at the moment?
Retention, because recruitment is a really expensive thing, not just in terms of cost, but also in terms of time. So having really good policies in place to help with retention, such as showing clear pathways in the business, so the individual staff member can know where they can take their career within that business, through to investing in training. Training's really key. We didn't really have very good training way back when I started becoming an employment solicitor, and it has massively come on leaps and bounds, helped with apprenticeships, because it was very uncommon to have apprenticeships a long time ago, but certainly they're more forthright now, and they're useful because not everyone wants to go through university and come into a career that level.
Absolutely. Paul, I imagine that's a good way to kind of segue into Chef Academy. That's something that HIT Training does, as an initiative. Can you explain a little bit more about that, and obviously how that helps, I guess, fill those gaps in the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. The whole thing around our Chef Academy is it's unique to HIT. We've developed our Chef Academy over 10 years. In fact, it's 10 in November. So it's been a real journey in terms of how we evolve, how we adapt our curriculum, our syllabus. We review our content every year, and whenever there's significant changes, it's become a really pivotal part of a chef's journey. Coming into a kitchen for the first time is quite a daunting experience. But it's vitally important to lay down those foundation transferable skills so that a chef can not only progress in their career, but to really hone those craft skills. We've a hospitality academy that does the same for front of house staff. But these academies are set up to take our apprentices from almost level 2, those junior levels, take them through supervisory roles, straight into management and then leadership roles. So there's a clear pathway for them of progression if they want it. And development that is very much bespoke around what the industry wants, what the industry needs.
So it's really interesting that you kind of said that there's a very clear pathway forward for people coming in, working their way through this. As I imagine in some hospitality businesses, that's probably not the case, and having that upward mobility is something that people coming into a business may need to fight for. Kirsty, from your view, how important is having that clear pathway and process embedded in a business?
Well, having a clear pathway embedded in the business is a make or break, because do you want to be an employer where you've got a high turnover of staff because They come in, they work for a short period of time, they just don't like who they're working with and leave again? Or do you want someone who's going to come in and really grow your business? Because particularly in the hospitality sector, you want those staff who are customer facing, and really understand what your business offering is. So you then get the knock-on effect of the great reviews from customers who attend to say, oh, the staff there are amazing, had such good experience. And you're not going to get that if you don't invest time and effort in your staff, be it from when they first come in and having a clear policy on what your probation is. So what's expected from day one, how long is the probation period going to be, and that sort of thing, through to, right, so you've been with us past probation, a couple of years forward, where do you want to go with your career? Do you want additional training so you can upskill into a different part of the business, or lateral move somewhere else?
Absolutely. And I guess, Paul, that's where training and development comes in really usefully, is that helps kind of sell that tale of here's where we want to be going and here's where we want you to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Within HIT, we cover all aspects of the hospitality industry, from back of house, kitchen, front of house, management, senior leadership. I think it's important though for employers to be able to better verbalise and acknowledge their own opportunities within a business. Only too often we talk to employers and say, well, what can you do? How can you develop here? And they need to have a look at that and say, these are the opportunities we can offer people, not just young people, but anybody within their operation. Is it a specific craft skill? Does someone in the front of house element want to learn those barista skills, or cocktail mixology, or just be better at what they're doing? The same with chefs. What are the levels within the kitchen? What does your menu, your food offer support? We're really fortunate that we've got a very flexible and broad offer across hospitality. And I think working alongside the employer, we can identify those elements of progression and a career pathway. But equally, there's things that people don't consider, like mentoring and coaching. How important to a business is to have a mentor in place, somebody that can support those business values, but also, take an apprentice under their wing, show them through, best possible example of how to operate in the business. So I think there's an opportunity there to work alongside our employers and say, right, what do you need? How can we support you? And what are the opportunities that exist within the organisation?
Absolutely. And I imagine that to a degree needs to be kind of decided by the business and ultimately kind of strategically planning for where it wants to go as that organisation and what it wants to be known for, essentially. Kirsty, from your view, how can a business best prepare itself for figuring out what it wants to do?
Yeah, so in terms of strategic planning, the hospitality business need to know ultimately what is it that they're aiming to achieve, to understand then how to get there. So if they want to have the reputation of being a fantastic hotel, a fantastic restaurant, then again, it's coming back to the staff. Those staff need to be suitably trained to be able to deliver that service. Or is it a case of you want to expand? And therefore, well, if you've got your expansion plans, how are you going to get there with, what are the costs? Because where we've had the increase to national insurance contributions and the increase to national minimum wage, it's had a significant impact in the hospitality industry, because we've got a lot of staff in that industry who are on national minimum wage. And therefore, what I'm seeing, unfortunately, in hospitality is some businesses are having to close at certain times because they won't have the custom coming in to be able to cover the staff costs, and so therefore having to make adaptations in that respect.
Absolutely. Yeah. As we said right at the top, staffing is probably one of the most important resources to any hospitality business. And I guess that question of retention and making sure that staff are happy and staff feel like they're valued is a very key consideration for businesses to have. What are kind of some of the best ways that business could really help with addressing retention and making sure that long term they've got the people that they need to do the job?
Yeah, so key things that businesses can do for retention in hospitality in particular is having clear career pathways. Where can the individual move within their own business? Health is so important these days, so mental health in particular. having mental health first aiders. If you look at some parts of a business, so a kitchen, for example, it's a really high stress level and environment to be working in. So having mental health first aiders and showing your staff that you're supporting them is absolutely key. Another thing is the salary. So have a competitive salary. And we've got the Tipping Act is now a year in from October 2024. So by having your policies in place for tipping, that's going to have a massive impact to make sure that staff feel valued and that they're receiving a fair share of the tips that come in.
Absolutely. I imagine, Paul, through HIT and obviously in your past experience in your career, tipping would have been quite a constant thing to consider in terms of your feeling and approach of that. How do you feel about that kind of
it's quite an emotive, quite a contentious subject. But, when you're in a restaurant or hotel or any service and you're tipping, it's always the question, what are you tipping? Are you tipping the food, tipping the service? Is it both? But ultimately, a fair way of sharing that within the team is, I think, super important. And I think the trunk system and the employer's approach to that is really key, really critical, because I think if you contribute, if you're working, if you are, contributing to the success of that business, then you should ultimately be able to share within that as well. I think the other thing which, has become very evident is, this industry is sometimes quite a crowded space. It's a highly competitive, saturated space in some cases. And, operators are looking for that point of difference. They want to be able to, offer an experience to customers. I think service experience now is more important than ever. People aren't just going there for a meal, for a drink. They're there to celebrate. We know that people are going out slightly less because of costs. So they're looking for that customer experience. And I think if you can offer training and development to your chefs to make them more efficient in their workplace, to make them more multi-skilled, wasting less, have a greater appreciation for the food. If your front of house staff are, doing that piece around customer service where there is kind of that almost that memory making coming into it, consultative sales so that people are seeing that return on investment. I think that's again where particularly training and development plays a really critical role to a business and can really add value.
It's a really interesting point that you made about kind of that investment into training and development. As a business, I imagine that, with pounds being stretched and squeezed as hard as they are, it's one where that opportunity to provide training and development is something that I imagine many businesses kind of push back to you on in conversations, saying we don't have the resources, we don't have the funds, we don't have the time to do this. And that seems to be backed up. Obviously, UK Hospitality, one of the leading association bodies, their recent survey data suggested that businesses are spending less on things like benefits, on things like training and development. How important is that battle to fight for, to have training and development as an opportunity for businesses to really take full advantage of?
I mean, it's vital. Your staff are by far your biggest asset. They're the lifeblood of your business. So training and development has never been more important. To have some longevity in this industry, you need to have the right people. And yes, there is a focus on senior levels and supervisory levels, but actually you need all levels. You need the junior levels, the team members. They're the people carrying out the work, but that's also your sort of talent pipeline. If you can invest and develop those people, then they're the ones that are going to go on to be your future supervisors, your future managers, future leaders. So I think it's vitally important to take a really holistic view of training and development in the business. We're a training provider who operates as a work-based model, so we've got flexibilities in how we operate, how we work alongside a business. Obviously, there's the levy, which funds businesses, to access training. But equally, if you're an SME or an independent, we have organisations that will pledge levy fund to support training and development. And, if time is a pressure, then there's no better time to get a training provider in like HIT to help you, because we can take a lot of that burden, a lot of the pain out of the training. We can support the development, get that apprentice through their programme, and look at how we can then progress them onto the next level if that's what they want to do. So I think working alongside the employer, understanding what they want and what they need, tailoring our approach around that, is a perfect way of being able to get the training that sometimes does take a back seat when operationally there's a lot going on. So I think if you can share that with somebody that can pick up that burden, then there's no better time to invest in training and development.
Absolutely. I think there was a really interesting point there you made about how it's not just for senior leadership for those management positions, but it's everyone on board, those from, the very entry level positions all the way up. However, I imagine there's also probably a little bit of a branding challenge for hospitality in terms of many younger people coming into the industry will see it as kind of somewhat as a stepping stone. They'll see it as a way they can earn cash while studying on something else they may want to pursue as a career. In terms of kind of flipping the script and really building hospitality as a good long-term place to build a career, what should businesses be aiming to do in that regard?
I think ownership is massive. People want to feel invested in. There's a real opportunity within hospitality as a sector that you're not just learning, high-level craft skill, that the knowledge, the behaviours. There's life skills in there that can pretty much prepare you for any kind of role in life. It's also one of the few industries you can pretty much take worldwide. If you have skills in hospitality, you can pretty much find work anywhere and apply those skills. I think employers need to do, a better job at identifying that, selling the benefits to the young people. But the great thing about apprenticeships is it's not just, for those 16 to 18-year-olds. Sometimes apprenticeship has a stigma behind it because of the name. But the assumption is it's for young people, but actually it's not. There's not an age limit on that. So, you could have that mid-career change, or we have quite a lot of people that, are parents that then their children get to the age where they can think about going back into a job or a career. I think we need to do better about promoting it as a career of choice. And that starts, of the messaging going out to parents and guardians. It starts at school. We seem to be overly fixated, particularly around academic, acknowledging academia and academic qualification, but actually craft skill in a chef or someone in the front of house role is every part equal to that. If your car breaks down, you go to a mechanic to fix it. So I think we need to understand that there's a huge amount of craft skills that are involved in the hospitality industry, and these things are massively transferable and really give people opportunities, not only for their career, but, for a really fulfilling, role.
Absolutely. And I imagine a lot of that comes down to, the business and how process heavy they are in having those kind of ways they can talk about their skills, ways they can talk about upward mobility, ways they can show that the skills that you're learning at these levels are beneficial, not just within hospitality as a sector, but also wider and wider reaching. Kirsty, what kind of processes should businesses be having in place to both kind of promote upward mobility, but also retention generally?
So having clear career pathways is absolutely key. So an individual can come in either at entry level, midpoint, and think, right, well, where can I go within this business and how can I grow with them? Because you want, by investing in the training and development, you want that staff member to feel part of a team and feel wanted. Having regular feedback and celebrating the successes. It's very common if there's something that goes wrong in any situation, performance is raised, but flip it the other way, focus on the positives and how they're doing really well. Training is so important, and yes, there's a cost to it, but there's also internal training that could help by really investing in your managers as well and your supervisors so they understand how best to be a manager and a supervisor. That's going to have a knock-on effect because people will go in and you think about, what's your day-to-day life? You're spending a lot of your time with these people, and if you've got a manager who's a fantastic person and really encouraging you, you then want to emulate that. So if it's a case where you've got an expanding restaurant who's opening another restaurant, there's going to be a vacancy over there as a manager, and I now can go and do that because I've been upskilled in the business.
We've obviously talked a lot about what's kind of on the horizon, what the industry is facing now, but I guess stretching our mind back 5 or so years pre-pandemic, when Brexit was also a big topic of conversation in terms of the rules coming into effect there and people both entering and leaving the country. What kind of pressure has that also put on the sector?
Shall I jump in on this one just to start with? So for a combination of the pre-pandemic and Brexit has seen a large reduction in employees available, particularly Brexit. I think it was around 80,000 EU workers left as a result. And the changes in immigration has meant that it's not easy for hospitality employers to get those workers back in because they don't have the support that they had before with the changes to the immigration white paper. So there's some real challenges there, and as well as the salary threshold, which I think will impact the more senior staff. And so chefs is a classic one where I'm hearing hospitality business say they're struggling to find chefs. So the fact that there is support with HIT in that regard is amazing, because that's there's definitely a pain point there that is now going to be filled.
Absolutely, and I imagine Paul there with the amount of people kind of leaving and those specialisms kind of leaving with them. It's probably one where you could argue there's almost kind of that opportunity as well of, with the right training, the right development, these people can kind of fill that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've almost forgotten about Brexit and the initial impact, and I'm sure we've probably forgotten about COVID as well to a degree, because these things seem to have happened, far too long ago. Actually, the industry's never really recovered from either of those things, and it contributes to that perfect storm. So we've got to get better at growing our own. We've got to get better at promoting the hospitality industry. And the government needs to do some work on that as well, because, we won't possibly be able to, face the demand with all these additional constraints and pressures. So I think it needs to be looked at as a career of choice. I think one thing, and maybe a silver lining that came out of COVID to a degree, was the industry had to have a bit of a look at itself, had a bit of a factory reset. So pay has become more competitive. Working hours and flexibility, work-life balance has become more competitive. And, for years, pay has always been one of the big issues that has been, quite negative in hospitality. Particularly, you look at chefs, you think the hours they work, the skills they're required to have. It's a pressured environment, and exactly the same as front of house roles. You're on your feet most of the day. So I think when you've got some positives that have come out of it, when pay is looking better, when there are employers that are more flexible in employment, but making opportunities for people that perhaps years ago thought they would never have been able to, get a full-time appointment. Someone who's got caring responsibilities, someone who's a parent that wants to find employment around the hours they have. There's probably more opportunity now for that. But I think equally employers need to have a much more flexible look at their business needs and say, well, actually, if I have got somebody that can work 3 hours or 4 hours, then take those opportunities. If someone's, wants to do it, has a passion for it, is interested, then for me, that's a massive solution to some of these employment problems that, employers are facing.
Absolutely. And I imagine, Kirsty, from an employment point of view, that flexibility in terms of working hours and capabilities is probably a good way to also address that retention challenge. If there's ways for more people to flexibly work, that's probably a way that can also help that longer term retention challenge.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the hospitality industry. It's one of those where you've got a really high level of effectively part-time workers, because they're just working casually to suit the needs of their home life. And more and more we're seeing work-life balance. So by being able to have a wider pool of staff and workers, it's only going to benefit the business, particularly with the Employment Rights Bill changes that are on the horizon, because the government won't move away from wanting to have the offer of guaranteed hours for 0-hour contracts. And it's going to have a significant impact on hospitality, because there's a huge administrative burden that needs to be undertaken now with monitoring what hours are worked, what shifts are covered. Do you have sufficient staff to cover this? What's the situation where you've got to change a shift or give notice to cancel it, because that's all going to have an impact. So by putting in place now a really wide pool of staff who can assist you, it's equally going to help with retention because you've got those staff thinking, wow, this is great. I can go and do sort of a 3-hour shift and work it around my studies, childcare needs, caring needs, that sort of thing, or just life. You know, they want to not do the long shifts, which historically have been the case.
Absolutely. It's really interesting that you kind of touched on there with the Employment Rights Bill. Obviously, that's working its way through Parliament at the moment as we record this. What else should businesses be doing to kind of prepare and adapt for the future of what hospitality could become?
Oh, big question. In terms of preparing for it, it's effectively getting your ducks in a row now. So do you have systems in place to be able to monitor what the hours and shifts are that are worked? Look at your contracts. Are they up to date? So a classic one in hospitality, particularly if you've got, say, a hotel or cafe and you've got several sites, then a really good mobility clause in your contract is going to really, really help to be able to move your staff around to meet the needs of your business, and at the same time not cause an issue which will come in, because again, one of the issues with the Employment Rights Bill is the government are saying, well, you won't be able to vary a contract without the staff's consent, and that's after lots of consultation. Otherwise, you could risk an unfair dismissal claim. So now is the time to start looking at your policies and procedures. Statutory sick pay is another one. We're going to have a big impact as a result of the statutory sick pay changes. So what it's going to be is, at the moment, you get paid on day 4, and then if it goes through, which I'm sure it will, then effectively April 26 you'll be paying sick pay from day 1. And there's pros and cons to it. There's pros in respect of the individual workers. If they're not very well, they don't have to worry about going into work, and particularly with the customer-facing industry that hospitality is. And then, you know, no one wants to go and have a nice meal and have someone coughing all over them. But then at the same time, it's a significant increase in costs for these businesses and employers in hospitality in particular, because the fear is that they're the ones who are going to get the most hit, will have to budget for these increased prices. And are you going to have those staff who effectively are just trying it on versus those who are the genuinely sick and don't want to risk not receiving any money as a result of not going in?
So I imagine it's quite a difficult balancing act there to make sure that everything's aligned properly. Yeah. Paul, I'd like to touch on something that you flagged in one of your previous answers in terms of the government and their investment in the sector. I thought it was interesting that you kind of flagged that up, considering with the UK's Invest 2035 plan, where they've listed a bunch of sectors that they're seeing as kind of the future of Britain and growth and economy. Hospitality wasn't on there, unfortunately. What should the government be doing to really help support a sector as large as hospitality? Yeah,
it's a huge subject, but massively short-sighted in my opinion. We fluctuate between being the 3rd and the 4th largest economy in this country. I don't know any other sector that can increase, spend, that can generate revenue, that can stabilise employment, offer opportunities. Some of the priority areas, construction, development, industry, hospitality forms the infrastructure for many of that. And, the government need to see that as an opportunity. We need to look at hospitality as a whole, a dedicated minister, somebody that can look at, what does tourism bring into this country? How else can we, increase and add more into our economy? Employment's a massive thing. There are so many roles linked into hospitality, sometimes indirectly, maintenance, services. These are places and opportunities for people to bring in a whole different level of skills and opportunity. You look at some of the, deprived areas of this country. Again, hospitality provides those valuable employment opportunities to support economy, but also, look at communities, look at local communities, look at, where can there be employment? Where can that, stabilise and offer opportunity where perhaps it doesn't exist? So I think the government need to look at hospitality as a career of choice. We need to promote that as an opportunity for people. They need to be as flexible as they can with funding associated with training, not cutting funding at a certain age, not putting restrictions on it. The hospitality industry is got to say really broad demographic of people working in it. It's not just for 16 to 18-year-olds. Of course, that's important to have those junior levels. But equally, people having, career breaks, people coming back into employment after a period of, caring or parenting, it's vitally important that they're supported and given those opportunities. And I think they could do a lot more for businesses, for operators, tax breaks, VAT tax breaks, some sensible support packages put in place to mitigate those rising costs, utilities and things like rent, stuff like that. These are the things that are really putting the squeeze on businesses. And, this is the reason why we're losing businesses, closing every week from, local pubs, country pubs to restaurants, hotels. That has a massive negative impact, not only on the community, but equally on unemployment. And that persona, that image of hospitality.
Absolutely, especially it's given how important it is to, I guess, the backbone of British culture. It's really a cornerstone, the local village pub, the local kind of restaurant. It's such an important and integral part of every community. It's something that needs to kind of be protected to a degree. Kirsty, I guess one probably more for you. In that regard, what should the hospitality sector itself be doing to really help support itself?
So getting behind its trade associations like UK Hospitality are doing lots of lobbying at the moment, because one of the problems that we've got with the government is they're trying to do a one-size-fits-all across all sectors, and hospitality is not the same as others. And I think that's probably where as well it's falling short, because the government aren't giving hospitality the credit that it should have. There are different pain points in different sectors, and hospitality are significantly stung at the moment with all the tax. And it's not just the situation with national minimum wage and national insurance costs increasing. I know hospitality businesses are concerned with business rates and so forth, so there's lots of that. So really sort of getting behind, go and speaking to your MP, go and speaking to your MP, so you can let them know what the pain points are. But at the same time, investing in that training so that they can retain staff, because the high costs of recruitment. So having clear policies and procedures in place and making the environment, because hospitality is a great place to work, particularly if those staff members feel part of a valid team and they want to turn around and actively promote, I work in this business and it's a fantastic place to work. That's really gonna help them.
Yeah, I think on the back of that, you go to other countries, places we often go on holiday. There is tremendous pride and support at government level of careers in hospitality. They're seen as prestigious and careers of choice, and I think we need to adopt that model. We need to do more to promote that, because it is probably, I'm obviously biased, but it's probably one of the best industries to work in. And as I said, I don't know any other industry which is as transferable as the skills you pick up, in hospitality. There's a real longevity and sustainability in this industry. We just need that support. We need that acknowledgement from the government. We need to start turning around some of those stigmas about, what this industry is.
I guess this is probably more one for both of you to some degree, but I guess with kind of government incentives, what kind of things are businesses able to take advantage of when it comes to hospitality, both in terms of training, recruitment, retention?
For an apprenticeship scheme for apprentices, first of all, there's flexibility on age. So it's not exclusive to, that 16 to 18. Sometimes the title apprenticeship, the name apprenticeship, conjures up ideas that it's just for young people. That's not true. We've had many people have, mid-career breaks or returning from a period of caring or parenting where they want to pick up, a career and start something from scratch. There's some national insurance breaks, under 25s, which is significant. If a business hasn't got to pay that in, that's a saving, which again is, supports them. I think also from what we provide, what HIT provide, we provide that career advice and guidance that we work with a lot of people. We've got a little black book to die for. So we work with a lot of companies and organisations that can offer opportunity, that are constantly, looking at recruitment and things like that. We also have a Senko within HIT, so we can provide additional support and guidance for SEN learners. So if you have, a learning need, that means that you get different levels of funding, you get more support on program. It's about looking at that accessibility, that anybody can come into an apprenticeship scheme and be supported and be, nurtured to get to that qualification, but also, what can they do in the rest of their career? We know that there are people that just want to stay within a role, and that's absolutely fine. Not everyone's looking for a promotion or the next step up, but equally we can take somebody from a level 2 right the way through to senior leadership at level 7. So it's a massive opportunity there for people, not only to engage individually, but for businesses and employers to identify what they need and how an apprenticeship scheme can support it.
Coming in off the back of that as well, it's going to help with diversity in the workplace, because you're going to have a whole different array of staff coming in that you wouldn't ordinarily have, and it's really key to have that diverse team and learn from experiences of others.
Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. I imagine that's really good messaging for kind of the sector as a whole, to have that it's not just something that is very much focusing the funnel on people just out of school or just out of college. It's one that anyone at any age can really change track and jump into and get that really robust skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. As a work-based provider, we work alongside an apprentice who's already employed, so they're already earning that full-time wage. They're on the radar of their employer, so if they are going to be looked at to develop skills or to be promoted, statistically that's more likely to happen. But equally, there's an opportunity there for them to develop to whatever level they want. And that means that from a work-life balance, they've got the employment covered. They're getting their training focused predominantly around their work. And then they have their time, for family, for friends, recreational activities. When I was at college, it was full-time. And somewhere you had to find a job because you needed to earn some money. And then somewhere around that, you needed to find some time off. So it was a real challenge to try and get that balance. So I think work-based, training and development through HIT definitely offers a greater level of accessibility and flexibility.
Well, I think we'll leave it there for today. Kirsty, Paul, I'd like to thank you guys so much for being willing to sit down and have this chat. And thank you all for watching.
Thank you.